Usually when we think about who we are, right, like our personality, our decision making, our daily moods, we almost always point right to our heads.
Oh, absolutely.
There is this deeply ingrained, almost universal expectation that the brain sitting inside our skull is the lone pilot of the ship.
Right, the captain locked in the wheelhouse.
Exactly. We picture this captain gripping the steering wheel, completely in charge of the vessel of your body as you navigate through life.
And that's really a purely top-down view of human biology,
Hmm.
which honestly is largely how modern medicine and psychology have operated for, well, the last century.
Right?
We've treated the brain as this isolated supreme commander sitting on a biological throne, protected by the skull and the blood-brain barrier.
Which is a very comforting idea. I mean, it makes intuitive sense.
It does.
The brain commands, the body obeys. If you want to change your mind, you work on your brain. If you have a mental health issue, you treat the brain. But then you start digging into the sources we have today for this deep dive, this massive stack of recent medical journals, psychiatric reviews, deep physiological texts. And that locked wheelhouse is just blown wide open.
It really is. The biological landscape you're looking at is, honestly, it's mind-bending.
Because the reality is you don't just have one brain, you actually have two.
Yeah.
One is resting inside your skull, sure. But the other one is operating right now completely in the dark, coiled up right inside your gut.
We are witnessing a profound paradigm shift in how we understand human physiology here.
Yeah.
We're moving away from a single brain model toward a dual brain reality.
Yeah.
And, the reason this matters so profoundly for you, the listener, is that this isn't just some abstract anatomy trivia.
Right. It's not just a fun fact for a dinner party.
Exactly. Understanding this second brain and the
Mhm.
biological superhighway that connects it to your skull gives you mechanical control over your own mental state.
And that is exactly what we're going to do today in this deep dive into the source material. We're going to map out how this hidden ecosystem operates.
And more importantly, how you can use specific daily habits, dietary interventions, and physical routines to fundamentally upgrade your mood, your cognitive function, and your metabolic health.
Because you have levers you can pull to change how your mind works. And as we're about to see, a massive number of those levers are located down in your digestive tract.
Right.
So let's jump straight into the architecture here. To understand the second brain, we first need to quickly map out the first one, just so we know what we're comparing it to, right?
Makes sense.
So the primary brain, the one we all know, is part of the central nervous system, or the CNS. This is your brain and your spinal cord.
And it houses roughly 86 billion neurons.
86 billion, which is huge.
It's massive. Those 86 billion neurons form the central processing unit. But, CPU is useless without inputs and outputs.
like a computer with no keyboard or monitor.
Exactly. So branching off from that central computer, we have the peripheral nervous system, or the PNS.
Okay.
If the CNS is the locked wheelhouse, the PNS is the vast network of electrical cables connecting that wheelhouse to every single sensor, engine room, and monitor throughout the entire ship.
And reading through these physiological guides, the peripheral nervous system has a few subdivisions. The one that keeps coming up in our sources is the autonomic nervous system.
Right, because the autonomic nervous system handles the background architecture of your survival.
The automatic stuff.
Precisely. It controls the involuntary processes. You don't have to consciously think about dilating your pupils when you walk into a dark room, or sweating when you get hot,
Or changing your heart rate when you stand up.
Exactly. The autonomic system manages all of that, and it operates primarily in two competing modes.
Okay, lay those out for us.
So first, you have the sympathetic nervous system, which people usually recognize as the fight or flight response.
Right, panic mode.
Yeah, it mobilizes stored energy, pumps blood to your skeletal muscles, and prepares you to survive an immediate threat.
Like if a tiger jumps out at you.
Exactly. Then, pulling in the completely opposite direction, you have the parasympathetic nervous system.
The rest and digest mode.
Yes. This is the state where your heart rate slows down, your breathing deepens, and your body actually allows itself to allocate energy toward digestion, tissue repair, and immune function.
So we have the central computer, the cables running out to the body, and this automatic toggle switch constantly flipping between panic mode and chill mode.
It's a good way to summarize it.
But here is where the anatomy gets weird. Because nestled within this massive body-wide network is a semi-independent structure called the enteric nervous system, or the ENS.
Yes.
And this is what researchers are calling our second brain.
The enteric nervous system is a dense, incredibly complex web of neurons embedded directly into the muscular walls of your gastrointestinal tract.
The whole thing?
The entire length of the digestive system, all the way from the esophagus down through the stomach and intestines to the rectum.
Wow.
To visualize it, imagine two cylindrical chain-link fences made entirely of nerve tissue, wrapped completely around your digestive organs.
I mean, let's avoid getting bogged down in too much Latin, but the sources do point out there are two distinct layers here performing two very distinct jobs, right?
Yeah, the separation of duties is critical. The outer layer is the myenteric plexus.
Okay.
Its primary job is motility. It acts as the physical director of the gut, coordinating the rhythmic muscle contractions, peristalsis, that push food down the tract.
So it's basically doing the heavy lifting, squeezing the tubes.
Exactly. And if this layer malfunctions, you get severe blockages or rapid, uncontrollable emptying.
Neither of which are great.
No, not at all. Then, sitting just inside that, closer to the hollow space of the gut, is the submucosal plexus.
And what does that one do?
This layer is the chemical director. It senses the exact composition of the food you just ate and regulates local blood flow, the secretion of digestive enzymes, and the release of mucus to break that specific food down safely.
See, what absolutely stopped me in my tracks while reading this research is the sheer scale of the operation here.
Oh, the numbers are staggering.
Right. We aren't just talking about a few scattered nerve endings that report back to the brain. The enteric nervous system contains about 100 million neurons.
Which is a huge number.
To put that number into perspective for anyone listening, that is roughly equivalent to the entire number of neurons contained in your spinal cord.
Yeah.
You have a spinal cord's worth of intelligence wrapped around your intestines.
The volume is astonishing. But honestly, the true revelation is its autonomy.
What do you mean?
Well, the enteric nervous system does not need the brain's permission to do its job.
Wait, really?
Yes, researchers have demonstrated that if you completely sever the main neural cable connecting the gut to the brain, the enteric nervous system barely skips a beat.
It just keeps going.
It will continue to manage the incredibly complex moment-to-moment regulation of digestion, muscle contraction, and enzyme secretion entirely on its own.
That is wild. I was trying to picture how this relationship actually works, and the best analogy I could come up with is corporate.
Okay, let's hear it.
So the central nervous system is the CEO sitting in the corner office on the top floor of a skyscraper.
Right.
And the enteric nervous system is the massive factory floor manager down in the basement.
I like that.
The factory manager, the gut, handles the day-to-day operations entirely independently. They do not need to call the CEO to ask how to break down a piece of toast or how to extract vitamins from an apple. They just do it.
That analogy works beautifully, provided we acknowledge that the factory floor manager is incredibly sophisticated.
Fair enough.
Because the enteric nervous system is essentially a fully equipped biological network in its own right. It isn't just using rudimentary signals.
Right.
It utilizes the exact same complex neurotransmitters that the brain does.
The exact same ones.
Yes. The chemicals we associate with high-level cognitive function. Serotonin for mood, dopamine for reward, acetylcholine for learning and memory. They are all being heavily utilized right there in your abdomen to manage the digestive process.
Which brings up a massive question.
Yeah.
If the factory floor manager is down there operating independently, using the same chemical language as the CEO, how do they talk to each other?
Because they clearly do.
They have to. Anyone who has ever been terrified of public speaking knows this. You get extremely nervous and your stomach immediately ties itself in knots.
Right.
That is the CEO panicking up in the skull and the factory floor manager feeling the shockwaves down in the basement.
Exactly. And they communicate via a dedicated high-speed biological superhighway known as the gut-brain axis.
The gut-brain axis.
Right. And the primary physical fiber optic cable of this highway is the vagus nerve.
Okay, tell us about the vagus nerve.
So the vagus nerve is the longest cranial nerve in the human body. The word vagus actually stems from the Latin word for wanderer.
Because it wanders through the body.
Exactly. It originates deep in the brainstem, wanders down through the neck, passes into the chest to connect with the heart and lungs, and then branches out like a massive root system all over the digestive tract.
Wait, I want to clarify the direction of traffic on this superhighway.
Okay.
Because for a long time, the medical assumption was that the vagus nerve was mostly a top-down communicator, right? The brain acting as a commander, shouting orders down to the organs.
That was the old model, yes.
But the data we are looking at in these sources flips that completely upside down.
It radically rewrites our understanding of who is in charge.
How so?
Anatomical studies show that up to 80% of the vagal nerve fibers are afferent,
Efferent meaning.
meaning 80% of the information traveling on this nerve is flowing from the gut to the brain.
Wow.
The brain is only doing 20% of the talking. The gut is constantly updating, warning, and informing the central computer about the biochemical reality on the ground.
So my gut is effectively dominating the conversation.
Pretty much.
My brain is essentially a captive audience to whatever the factory floor manager is experiencing down below.
A captive audience is a great way to put it. And, the nature of those messages is deeply chemical.
Right.
This is where we have to introduce the third player in this ecosystem,
Which is?
the gut microbiome.
Ah, the bugs.
Yes. You have trillions of bacteria, viruses, and fungi living inside your digestive tract. And for a long time, we viewed them simply as passive hitchhikers that just sort of help break down food.
But they're not passive.
Not at all.
Yeah.
The modern research reveals that these microbes are highly active chemical factories. They are manufacturing massive amounts of neurotransmitters.
And this is a point from the sources that everyone listening really needs to internalize.
Yeah, the numbers are crazy.
Over 90% of the body's serotonin resides in the enteric nervous system.
Yep.
Over 50% of the body's dopamine is manufactured in the gut.
It's incredible.
90% of your serotonin, the exact chemical we culturally associate with happiness, well-being, and mood stabilization, is not located in your brain. It is manufactured and stored in your digestive tract by bacteria.
And the microbial influence extends far beyond just serotonin and dopamine.
What else are they making?
These gut bacteria are also producing immense quantities of GABA.
And GABA is?
It's an inhibitory neurotransmitter. GABA acts as the biological brakes for your nervous system. It calms things down and prevents anxiety.
Okay.
They're also synthesizing molecules like kynurenine, which directly influence systemic inflammation and your immune responses.
So the bacteria inside you are actively producing the molecular building blocks that dictate your mental and emotional states.
Absolutely.
But I want to understand the exact mechanism here. Like, how does a microscopic bug in my intestine actually change my brain chemistry? I eat a meal. Then what happens?
Let's trace the biological journey. When you eat dietary fiber complex carbohydrates found in vegetables, legumes, whole grains, your human cells actually lack the enzymes to digest it.
So we can't even break it down ourselves.
Right. It passes through your stomach and upper intestine's mostly intact. But when it reaches your lower gut, your microbiome takes over.
Okay, the factory workers cluck in.
Exactly. These bacteria ferment that fiber. And in the process of that fermentation, they excrete metabolic byproducts called short-chain fatty acids, or SCFAs.
That's CFAs.
Yeah. And the most heavily researched of these is a compound called butyrate.
Okay, so the bacteria eat the fiber, and they produce this butyrate in my colon. How does butyrate down there affect the brain inside my skull?
Because butyrate is a highly specialized molecule. It is lipophilic, meaning it can easily dissolve in fats.
Why does that matter?
This allows it to enter the bloodstream from the gut, travel up to the head, and slip directly across the blood-brain barrier.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The blood-brain barrier is notoriously strict, right? It's designed to keep toxins and pathogens out of the central nervous system.
The ultimate VIP bouncer.
Exactly. But butyrate is granted VIP access. Once inside the brain, butyrate acts as a powerful anti-inflammatory agent. It influences the expression of specific genes related to memory, and it provides an alternative energy source for brain cells.
So the bacteria are literally feeding and programming the brain from a distance.
That is exactly what they are doing.
Okay, well, if the superhighway works this well, and if 90% of our serotonin is manufactured and stored in the gut, and if these bacteria are pumping out the GABA and dopamine that regulate our emotional states,
Yeah.
it leads me to a massive contradiction.
I think I know where you're going with this.
Why have we spent the last 50 years of modern medicine trying to treat mood disorders primarily by tweaking brain chemistry?
Right.
If someone is depressed, we throw SSRIs at their brain to artificially keep serotonin floating between synapses. Why haven't we been looking at the health of the factory floor where the serotonin is actually made?
You are touching on the exact friction point that is currently tearing through the fields of psychiatry and neurology.
Because it just seems so obvious now.
It does. But for decades, the dominant biomedical model viewed the brain as an isolated, pristine organ, completely walled off by the blood-brain barrier, suffering from localized, mysterious chemical imbalances.
Right.
If you were depressed, it was a brain problem. Full stop.
Just bad genetics or a broken brain.
Exactly. But the undeniable evidence that the gut and the brain are inextricably linked, both chemically and electrically, has birthed a revolutionary new discipline,
Which is
metabolic psychiatry.
metabolic psychiatry. And this is where the story gets incredibly personal for a lot of people.
It really does.
Because this field explores what happens when the communication on that superhighway breaks down. And what the sources show is that when the metabolic system in the body breaks down, the brain breaks down right along with it.
The clinical data linking metabolic dysfunction to severe psychiatric illness is staggering.
Yeah, the numbers in these papers are wild.
And it completely shatters the old isolated brain model. There's a deeply established bidirectional link between metabolic disorders, conditions like insulin resistance, obesity, and type 2 diabetes, and severe psychiatric conditions, including schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and major depressive disorder.
Now, historically, the medical community dismissed this overlap as a behavioral side effect.
Yeah. The assumption was always, well, of course, a patient with severe depression or schizophrenia is going to develop diabetes.
Because they're often lethargic, their medications cause weight gain, and they might not have the energy to cook healthy meals.
Right. The assumption was that the mental illness came first, and the bad physical health was just a tragic downstream consequence of their lifestyle.
But let's look closely at the Perry et al. Study from 2021, because it destroys that assumption completely.
It's a fantastic study.
They followed a massive cohort of children from youth all the way into young adulthood. They weren't looking at kids with mental illness initially, they were looking at their physical metabolic markers.
And what did they find?
They found that kids who had the highest levels of insulin resistance and other metabolic abnormalities in childhood had a drastically increased risk of developing adult mood and psychotic disorders like schizophrenia and major depression years later.
Exactly. The physical metabolic dysfunction clearly preceded the psychiatric breakdown.
It wasn't a side effect of the mental illness, it was a precursor.
And the causal arrow points both ways. There's a complementary massive cohort study by Pan et al. In 2010 that tracked thousands of women over several years.
Right, the Pan study.
They found exactly what you'd expect. Women with a history of depression were significantly more likely to develop type 2 diabetes later in life.
Which fits the old model.
But the crucial finding was the reverse. Women who developed diabetes first, with no prior history of mental illness, had a highly elevated risk of subsequently developing severe depression.
Wow.
Poor metabolic health is a massive predictor of psychiatric morbidity. The body's inability to process energy correctly creates a toxic environment that eventually breaks the brain.
Okay, I really need to drill down into the how here.
Let's do it.
How does insulin resistance or a gut problem physically transform into a symptom like bipolar mania or deep depression? What is the actual biological bridge between a metabolic failure in the body and a psychological failure in the mind?
To understand that bridge, we have to look at the brain's private security force.
Okay.
The microglia.
Microglia.
Yes. Microglia are specialized immune cells, specifically macrophages, that reside exclusively in the central nervous system.
And what is their normal day job?
Under normal, healthy conditions, microglia are the tireless maintenance workers of the brain. They patrol the neural networks, cleaning up cellular debris, fighting off occasional local infections, and pruning back unnecessary synaptic connections to keep your memory and cognition sharp.
So they are the good guys. They keep the wheelhouse clean and orderly.
They are essential for a healthy brain.
Right.
But their behavior completely changes when the gut-brain axis sends an alarm.
Okay, walk us through that. Trace it from the gut.
So suppose you have chronic gut dysbiosis, a severe imbalance where pathogenic inflammatory bacteria outnumber the beneficial fiber-fermenting bacteria.
The bad guys are winning.
Exactly. This imbalance physically damages the mucosal lining of the intestines. The tight junctions, which are the biological seals between your intestinal cells, begin to loosen and break apart.
And this is what people call leaky gut.
Yes. The medical term is intestinal permeability, or leaky gut.
So going back to our analogy, this is the factory floor falling into total disrepair and literally leaking toxic industrial waste into the corporate ventilation system.
In a literal biological sense, yes. When those tight junctions break, toxins from the gut, specifically lipopolysaccharides or OPS, which are structural components of bad bacteria, spill out of the digestive tract and directly into your bloodstream.
Oh, that seems terrible.
It is. Your systemic immune system detects this bacterial debris in the blood and triggers a massive inflammatory response. Inflammatory cytokines flood your circulatory system.
And what about the blood-brain barrier? Doesn't it stop that?
It blocks a lot of things, sure, but chronic systemic inflammation eventually permeates it.
And that's when the brain's security guards notice the smoke coming through the vents.
Exactly. When those inflammatory signals reach the brain, the microglia detect them and undergo a radical physical transformation.
What did it do?
They stop their normal beneficial maintenance work, they drop their brooms, pull out their weapons, and initiate a full-blown neuroinflammatory response.
Wait, they start attacking the brain.
They begin secreting their own inflammatory chemicals right into the delicate neural tissue.
Wow.
This chronic neuroinflammation fundamentally disrupts how neurotransmitters are synthesized. It degrades the protective myelin sheaths around nerves, and it physically damages the synaptic networks.
I want to pause and just make sure the listener really grasps the implication of what you just described.
It's heavy.
It is.
Yeah.
Because if someone is suffering from chronic anxiety, brain fog, or deep depression,
Yep.
it might not be a genetic destiny or an isolated chemical imbalance that they just have to suffer with. What we are saying is that those agonizing mental states might actually be systemic energy failures. They're downstream neurological symptoms of an upstream metabolic fire driven by a leaky gut and hyperaggressive microglia.
The brain is incredibly energy hungry. It demands roughly 20% of the body's total metabolic energy output, despite accounting for only about 2% of the body's physical weight.
It's an energy hog.
Huge energy hog. So when systemic inflammation and insulin resistance impair the body's ability to efficiently deliver and process energy, the brain is the first organ to suffer.
Makes sense.
The neural networks simply do not have the clean energy required to fire correctly. They misfire, they fatigue, and you experience that biologically as depression, anxiety, or in severe cases, psychosis.
Right now, as someone is listening to this on their commute or while doing dishes, if they just ate a breakfast of highly processed, low-fiber, high-sugar foods, are they basically sounding the alarm for their microglia?
Unfortunately, yes.
Could the absolute explosion of mental health crises we are seeing globally just be a direct reflection of our modern diets constantly inflaming our gut-brain axis?
The scientific consensus in neurogastroenterology is increasingly leaning toward yes. It is an unbroken chain of causality.
Spell that chain out for us.
The specific food you eat dictates the specific populations of bacteria that thrive in your gut. Those bacteria dictate the chemical signals and inflammatory markers sent up the vagus nerve and through the bloodstream.
Right.
Those signals dictate the inflammatory state of your microglia, and your microglia dictate your mood, your focus, and your mental resilience.
Which is heavy, but also incredibly empowering.
It really is.
Because it means the locus of control is back in our hands. If metabolic dysfunction and a damaged gut are breaking the brain, we don't have to just sit around feeling helpless.
No, not at all.
We can use precise metabolic interventions to heal it. We can fix the fuel line. And that starts directly with what we put on our plates. So, I want to dive deep into nutritional interventions, specifically the ketogenic diet, because the research here is astonishing.
The ketogenic diet, or KD, suffers from a severe branding problem in popular culture.
Oh, absolutely. People just think of it as eating blocks of cheese to lose weight.
Right. It is often dismissed as just another superficial weight loss fad or a biohacking trend for tech executives. But its origins are strictly medical and profoundly neurological.
Yeah, the history and the sources is fascinating.
It was developed in 1921 at the Mayo Clinic, specifically to mimic the metabolic effects of fasting in order to treat severe pediatric epilepsy.
Right, because before modern anti-seizure medications existed, doctors observed that if a child with violent, uncontrollable seizures simply stopped eating, if they fasted for several days, the seizures would completely stop.
The brain would calm down.
But obviously, you cannot fast a growing child forever.
No, you can't.
So the researchers at the Mayo Clinic had to figure out what biological mechanism fasting triggered and how they could replicate it with food.
And what they discovered is the body's secondary energy system.
Okay, explain that.
Normally, the human body runs on glucose sugar derived from carbohydrates. When you fast, or when you drastically restrict carbohydrate intake to almost zero, your body depletes its glucose reserves.
Right, the tank is empty.
So out of necessity, the liver begins breaking down stored body fat into molecules called ketone bodies.
Ketones.
Yes. These ketones are an incredibly potent alternative energy source. Crucially, ketones easily cross the blood-brain barrier.
So they become the new brain fuel.
Exactly. The Mayo Clinic researchers designed a diet that was extremely high in fat, adequate in protein, and virtually devoid of carbohydrates. This forced the children's bodies into a constant state of producing ketones, a state called nutritional ketosis.
And the clinical results for these epileptic children were insane. A 75% reduction in seizures for children who had drug-resistant epilepsy.
It was a medical breakthrough.
Just by changing the fuel source of the brain from glucose to ketones, the violent electrical storms in their brains ceased.
The underlying neurological foundation is what matters here. Epilepsy is characterized by hyperexcitable, unstable neural networks that fire out of control.
Right.
Shifting the brain's fuel from glucose to ketones fundamentally stabilizes those networks.
Which brings us to the psychiatric connection.
Yes. Fast forward to the present day, and metabolic psychiatrists began to ask a very logical but radical question.
Which is?
If ketones can stabilize the hyperexcitable neural networks in epilepsy, could they do the exact same thing for severe psychiatric conditions that also feature hyperexcitable, erratic brain activity?
Conditions like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the Sethi et al. Pilot trial from 2024. This study feels like a landmark moment in psychiatric history.
It really is a game changer.
Let's look at who they were treating. These were not people with mild occasional anxiety. They took patients with severe chronic schizophrenia and bipolar disorder.
Very ill individuals.
Patients who are suffering daily despite being heavily medicated with standard, powerful antipsychotic and mood-stabilizing drugs. They took this vulnerable, deeply suffering population, and they put them on a strict ketogenic diet.
And the parameters of the diet were rigorous. They restricted carbohydrate intake to roughly 20 grams a day maximum.
Which is basically nothing.
It's very low. They pushed healthy, high-fat foods, ensured adequate protein, and mandated fibrous vegetables to support the gut.
And the clinical outcomes.
For these treatment-resistant patients, they were nothing short of remarkable. For the patients who adhered to the diet and maintained measurable nutritional ketosis, the schizophrenia cohort saw a 32% reduction in psychotic symptoms.
Wow.
The voices, the paranoia, the hallucinations diminished by a third simply by changing their fuel source.
That alone is amazing, but the outcomes for the bipolar patients were even more profound.
They were unprecedented. The proportion of bipolar patients classified by psychiatrists as recovered or recovering went from 38% at the beginning of the trial to 81% by the end.
81%.
And if you look exclusively at the patients who fully adhered to the diet for the entire duration, 100% of them reached a recovered or recovering state.
100%.
Yes.
In a population dealing with a chronic, life-altering psychiatric illness that notoriously resists medication.
It's almost hard to believe, but the data is there.
It is like looking at a sputtering, backfiring, violently shaking car engine and realizing the problem isn't the engine itself. You just need to drain the standard unleaded gas, the glucose, and fill the tank with high-octane jet fuel, the ketones, to stop the misfiring.
The chemistry supports that analogy entirely. Ketones fundamentally alter the bioenergetics of the brain across several simultaneous pathways.
Let's break down exactly how they do this.
Okay, first, ketones drastically reduce glutamate excitotoxicity.
Glutamate is?
Glutamate is the brain's primary excitatory neurotransmitter. It is the gas pedal for your neurons.
Okay, so it makes them fire.
Right. In many psychiatric conditions, there is far too much glutamate, causing neurons to fire erratically until they literally burn themselves out.
That sounds exhausting.
It is.
Oh.
Ketones enhance the brain's ability to clear excess glutamate from the synapses, quieting the storm.
Taking the foot off the gas.
Exactly. Second, ketosis significantly increases the synthesis of GABA.
Which we mentioned earlier.
Right. GABA is the calming neurotransmitter, the biological brakes. So ketones simultaneously lift off the gas and press the brakes.
I love how clear that is. It is doing exactly what many pharmaceutical psychiatric medications are designed to do. But instead of forcing an artificial chemical blockade, it is achieving it by fixing the root metabolic foundation.
Precisely.
But the sources also mention something about epigenetics here, which I found fascinating. There's a whole section on how ketones literally change how your DNA is read.
Oh, this is where the science gets truly spectacular.
Lay it on us.
The primary ketone body produced by the liver is called beta-hydroxybutyrate. Researchers have discovered that beta-hydroxybutyrate is not just passive fuel, it acts as an active signaling molecule that alters gene expression.
How does fuel alter genes?
Well, inside your cells, your DNA is tightly spooled around proteins called histones. When DNA is wound up tight, the genes in that section cannot be read or utilized.
Okay, they're packed away in storage.
Right. There are enzymes called histone deacetylases, or HDACs, whose job is to keep that DNA tightly spooled and hidden.
Let me make sure I follow. HDACs are essentially locking the DNA away in a vault,
Precisely. Beta-hydroxybutyrate acts as a direct HDAC inhibitor.
meaning it stops the enzymes.
It blocks the enzymes that keep the vault locked. When those enzymes are inhibited, the DNA unspools, and the cell can suddenly read genes that were previously silenced.
Wow. And what genes are getting unlocked?
The most critical gene that gets unlocked by ketones is the one responsible for brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF.
BDNF. That is basically Miracle-Gro for the brain.
Right. It is the ultimate neuroplasticity protein. BDNF helps existing neurons survive under stress. It stimulates the growth of new dendrites and synapses, and it promotes the actual birth of new neurons in the hippocampus.
So by adopting a ketogenic diet, these patients weren't just changing their fuel.
No, they were literally unstooling their DNA to flood their damaged brains with the exact protein required to rebuild their neural networks.
That is an incredibly deep level of physiological repair.
It's repairing the actual hardware.
Now, realistically, a strict 20-gram-a-day ketogenic diet is a massive lifestyle commitment. It is a powerful medical intervention.
It is not easy for sure.
Let's say you are listening to this and you aren't dealing with severe treatment-resistant schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. You just want to optimize your gut-brain axis to clear up general brain fog, stabilize your daily mood, and avoid inflaming your microglia.
Great.
You don't necessarily have to go full keto to achieve a healthy baseline, do you?
Not at all. General gut-friendly nutrition follows the exact same underlying logic. You want to feed the beneficial bacteria, starve the pathogenic bacteria, and lower systemic inflammation.
So what's the baseline diet look like?
The primary pillar of a gut-supportive diet is high-fiber foods. We're talking about a diverse range of vegetables, legumes, seeds, and fruits.
Because fiber is the fuel for the factory floor.
Yes. As we traced earlier, fiber is the raw material your microbiome requires to ferment and produce those vital short-chain fatty acids like butyrate.
Right, the VIP bouncers.
Exactly. Without fiber, the good bacteria literally starve and the bad bacteria take over.
And the diversity of the plant seems to be key in the literature, too. You can't just eat broccoli every day and call it good.
No, different bacteria prefer different types of plant fibers. You need a wide variety.
You also need to actively repopulate the factory floor with good workers, which is where fermented foods come in, right?
Incorporating living fermented foods is crucial. Things like authentic kefir, unpasteurized sauerkraut, kimchi, and traditional yogurt introduce massive populations of live, beneficial microbes directly into your gastrointestinal tract.
They send in reinforcements.
They help crowd out the inflammatory bacteria. And finally, you need to provide the structural building blocks for the brain itself, which means omega-3 fatty acids.
Salmon, chia seeds, that sort of thing.
Yes, found abundantly in fatty fish, flax seeds, chia seeds. Omega-3s are essential for reducing neuroinflammation and physically constructing the fluid, flexible cell membranes of your neurons.
So diet provides the right metabolic fuel, the raw fiber for the factory floor, and the structural building blocks for the brain.
That's the nutritional triad.
But fixing the chemistry is only half the battle, isn't it?
Correct.
The gut-brain axis also relies heavily on physical mechanics. We need to physically stimulate the nervous system and manually move accumulated stress out of the body.
Yes, we do.
Which brings us to a fascinating area of the research, movement as medicine.
The physiological impact of physical movement on the autonomic nervous system cannot be overstated. It goes far beyond just burning calories.
What are we aiming for here?
Consistent, general exercise, aiming for roughly 150 minutes a week of brisk walking, cycling, swimming, or weightlifting, has a profound, measurable effect on vagal tone.
Okay, let's define vagal tone for the listener. How do we measure the health of this invisible wandering nerve?
Vagal tone refers to the activity and efficiency of the vagus nerve. In clinical settings, we often measure it indirectly through a metric called heart rate variability, or HRV.
HRV, right.
If your heart beats at 60 beats per minute, it doesn't beat exactly once every single second like a metronome. There are tiny millisecond variations between each beat.
So it's not perfectly steady.
Exactly. A high HRV means there is a lot of variation, which indicates that your autonomic nervous system is highly flexible. It is constantly making microadjustments, capable of shifting instantly between stress and relaxation.
And exercise helps that.
Exercise forces the nervous system to practice this flexibility, dramatically improving your HRV and your vagal tone.
Reading through these older physiological guides and traditional medical texts, there is a recurring theme that modern life, literally traps energy in our heads.
Oh, absolutely.
We sit at desks for 9 hours a day, we stare at glowing rectangles, we ruminate on emails, we worry about the future. Our sympathetic nervous system spins up, preparing us to fight a tiger, but we never physically move.
We just sit there and steep in cortisol.
Right. General exercise serves as the mechanical release valve. It physically moves that trapped, anxious energy out of the head and dissipates it through the musculature of the body.
A vigorous run or lifting heavy weights is incredibly effective for burning off that stagnant stress hormone cocktail. But the research on mind-body synergy takes the neurological benefits to an entirely different level.
The mind-body connection.
When we look at the data on practices like Tai Chi, we see physical movement acting as a direct software update for the brain.
I was absolutely captivated by the Tai Chi data.
It's beautiful research.
For anyone unfamiliar, Tai Chi is a traditional Chinese martial art and moving meditation. Unlike the repetitive pounding motion of running on a treadmill or the static agonizing holds of certain yoga poses, Tai Chi requires continuous, incredibly slow, flowing movement sequences.
Right.
It constantly demands dynamic balance shifting, precise sensor and motor coordination, and deep rhythmic breathing.
The key to Tai Chi's efficacy is the cognitive demand required to perform it.
What do you mean?
Well, when you run on a treadmill, after a few minutes, your mind can wander. You can listen to an audiobook, you can stress about your grocery list, right? The physical movement becomes entirely automatic.
Yeah, you zone out.
Tai Chi never becomes automatic. Because the movements are slow, complex, and constantly shifting, it requires intense, unbroken mental focus.
So you have to stay present.
You are demanding that your prefrontal cortex, the area of the brain responsible for high-level executive function, attention, and emotional regulation, stay highly engaged while simultaneously managing complex, full-body physical positioning.
So, if a standard treadmill run is a brute force metabolic fix flushing out cortisol and dumping endorphins, Tai Chi is actually forcing the brain to physically rewire itself because of that intense dual-tasking focus.
The biological bridge between that focused, slow movement and actual brain growth is stunning.
Brain growth.
Yes. Physical activity alone drives a baseline level of neuroplasticity. But when you tightly couple that physical activity with sustained psychological focus, you achieve a synergistic effect.
Wow.
Systematic neurological research demonstrates that long-term Tai Chi practice actively combats age-associated brain atrophy.
Meaning it stops the brain from shrinking.
Exactly. MRI scans show that it actually increases the physical volume and density of gray matter in the hippocampus, which is critical for memory consolidation, and the prefrontal cortex.
So it's building a bigger, stronger brain.
It optimizes the functional connectivity within the brain, making your neural processing far more efficient.
And because you are breathing slowly and deeply from your diaphragm the entire time you are moving, you are constantly sending a massive mechanical signal up the vagus nerve to the brain saying, no matter how much physical effort this requires, we are safe.
Safety signaling is the ultimate goal here.
Right.
Tai Chi systematically decreases the reactivity of the HPA axis, which is the body's primary stress response system. By forcing the body to move while forcing the mind to remain calm and focused, you are essentially strength training your parasympathetic nervous system.
You're teaching the body not to panic.
You're teaching your body how to exist in a state of high physical engagement without crossing over into panic.
It proves that highly intentional mental and physical practices can literally alter the physical architecture of our nervous system.
Absolutely.
But, Tai Chi takes years to master, and a ketogenic diet requires massive daily discipline. These are foundational lifestyle pillars. But let's get deeply practical for a moment. What if a listener is in the middle of a brutal, stressful workday? They are sitting at their desk, their gut is tied in painful knots, their mind is racing with anxiety, and they need to intervene right now. They can't start doing Tai Chi in the middle of the office.
No, HR might have something to say about that.
Right.
This is where we examine daily habits, specific routines, and immediate mechanical hacks that serve as direct levers to pull when your sympathetic nervous system is stuck in an aggressive fight or flight loop.
How do we do that?
We can manually hack the vagus nerve. Because the vagus nerve wanders down from the brainstem, it passes directly through the vocal cords and the back of the throat.
The vagus nerve goes right past the throat.
Yes, this anatomical quirk gives us a direct physical access point. We can physically massage the vagus nerve using vocal vibrations.
This was easily one of my favorite takeaways from the entire stack of research.
It's so practical.
You can stimulate your vagus nerve and calm your brain down simply by humming. The data shows that humming a favorite song for 5 minutes, singing loudly in your car during a stressful commute, or even engaging in traditional religious chanting or prayer like chanting OM or reciting rhythmic liturgy has a profound biological effect.
It does.
The physical vibration of your vocal cords directly mechanically stimulates the vagal afferent fibers in your neck.
It sounds almost too simple to be effective, but the biological outcome is immediate and measurable.
People probably think it's just a placebo.
No, clinical studies monitoring heart rate variability show that these specific vocalizations instantly increase parasympathetic activity. The vibration sends a mechanical wave up the nerve to the brainstem, interrupting the stress loop and improving emotional regulation.
That is incredible.
Similarly, we can use temperature and reflex techniques to force a rapid neurological reset.
Like the mammalian dive reflex, I find this mechanism fascinating.
It is an evolutionary leftover.
Okay, explain how it works.
If you experience brief, intense cold exposure to your face, specifically around the eyes and cheeks where the trigeminal nerve is located, your body thinks you have just plunged into deep, cold water.
So it panics.
No, it triggers the mammalian dive reflex. The trigeminal nerve instantly signals the brainstem to slow the heart rate down dramatically and shunt blood flow away from the extremities and toward the core and the brain to conserve oxygen.
So it forces you to calm down to survive underwater.
Exactly. You can trigger this at your desk simply by going to the bathroom and splashing freezing cold water on your face for 10 seconds.
That's it, just cold water on the face.
It immediately overrides a panic or anxiety response.
Yeah.
Even vigorously gargling a glass of water activates the vagus nerve at the back of the throat.
Splashing freezing water on your face, or aggressively gargling water, or humming loudly in your car, you are essentially performing the biological equivalent of pressing Ctrl-Alt-Delete to force restart a frozen, overwhelmed computer.
That's a perfect analogy.
You are forcing the entire nervous system to reboot its current processes.
A manual override is exactly what it is. You are physically breaking the cyclical loop of psychological stress.
Okay, so we break the loop. Then what?
Once you break that loop with a hack, you have a window of opportunity to sustain that calm state through more foundational breath and mind practices.
Like breathing exercises.
Which brings us to diaphragmatic breathing. Most adults under chronic stress breathe shallowly into their upper chest.
Sort of short, panicked breaths.
This chest breathing signals to the brain that you are running from a threat. Slow, deep, diaphragmatic breathing, breathing deep into your belly so that your stomach expands outward, mechanically stretches the receptors in your diaphragm.
And those are connected to the superhighway.
Those receptors are wired directly to the vagus nerve. When they stretch, they send a powerful safety signal up to the brain.
I want to highlight that term again, safety signaling.
It's vital.
If the brain is locked in the wheelhouse, it doesn't know what is happening outside. It only knows what signals it receives from the body. If the breathing is fast, the brain assumes danger. If the breathing is slow and deep, the brain assumes safety.
That mechanism is vital to understand. When the brain continuously receives safety signals from the diaphragm and the vagus nerve, it stops directing your metabolic energy toward hypervigilance, muscle tension, and anxiety.
It calls off the guards.
It finally allows the body to redirect those precious energetic resources toward cellular repair, digestion, and immune function.
That makes total sense.
Traditional practices like prayer and mindfulness meditation achieve deeply complementary effect. By actively training your brain to observe stressful thoughts without immediately reacting to them, you reinforce that top-down safety signal, allowing the parasympathetic system to fully take over.
But, none of these hacks, not the humming, the cold water, or the deep breathing, are going to save you if the absolute foundation of your biology is crumbling.
That's the hard truth.
We have to touch on circadian rhythms and lifestyle. You can hum OM for 3 hours a day, but if you are sleeping 4 hours a night and eating highly processed donuts at midnight, your gut-brain axis is going to remain a chaotic disaster.
Circadian rhythm alignment is absolutely non-negotiable for metabolic and psychiatric health.
Non-negotiable.
Every organ in your body, including your gut microbiome, operates on a 24-hour biological clock. The internal clocks in your brain and your digestive tract must be synchronized for the system to function.
So how do we sync them?
This means exposing your eyes to natural sunlight first thing in the morning to halt melatonin production. It means avoiding bright, artificial screens late at night. And crucially, it means eating your meals at consistent times during daylight hours.
Wait, how does eating at a consistent time affect the brain?
When you align your eating and sleeping patterns with the natural light cycle, You optimize the precise timing of your body's hormonal releases.
Okay, so it's a timing issue.
You ensure a sharp spike of cortisol in the morning to wake you up and provide focus. You ensure optimal insulin sensitivity during the day so your brain gets steady energy without massive crashes. And you allow melatonin to rise naturally at night to promote deep, restorative sleep.
It's like an orchestra playing in perfect time.
This biological regularity physically stabilizes the neural circuits involved in mood regulation. Without quality sleep and a synchronized clock, the metabolic environment becomes toxic and the brain inevitably suffers.
Everything falls apart.
Add in meaningful, real-world social connection, which acts as another profound safety signal to the nervous system, and you build the bedrocks upon which all these other interventions rest.
Let's take a deep breath and recap the incredible paradigm-shifting journey we've been on today through these sources.
It's been a lot of ground covered.
It really has. We started by destroying the myth of the isolated brain. We discovered that we have a second, fully autonomous enteric nervous system possessing a spinal cord's worth of intelligence, operating directly in our gut.
The factory floor manager.
Exactly. We mapped out the vagus nerve, the biological superhighway where 80% of the traffic is the gut shouting up at the brain, proving that our digestive tract is constantly dictating our brain's reality.
And we saw what happens when it goes wrong.
Right. We explored the revolutionary field of metabolic psychiatry, uncovering how a leaky gut and systemic energy failure trigger our microglia security guards to cause the neuroinflammation underlying severe psychiatric distress.
The bad guy is breaching the blood-brain barrier.
And most importantly, we broke down exactly how to take back control of this entire ecosystem. We can change the fuel source entirely with the metabolic jet fuel of the ketogenic diet.
We can force neuroplastic software updates through the slow, focused movements of Tai Chi.
And we can use immediate mechanical vagus nerve hacks like humming, cold water exposure, and deep diaphragmatic breathing to force restart our overwhelmed nervous systems.
The overarching, undeniable takeaway from all of this research is that you must fundamentally change how you view your health, your mood, and yourself.
You really have to.
You are not just a brain floating in a sterile jar, disconnected from the flesh, suffering from random chemical imbalances. You are a highly complex, deeply interconnected biological ecosystem.
Every system talks to every other system.
Every single one. The specific food you eat, the way you physically move your body, and the depth of your breath directly dictate your psychological reality. You possess the mechanical tools to influence this ecosystem, to send biological safety signals, and to construct resilient mental health from the ground up.
It is a total reimagining of human biology, and it brings us right back to where we started our conversation today.
The captain in the wheelhouse.
Right. We used to look in the mirror and think the brain in our skull was the lone captain firmly steering the ship. But now we know the ship is largely being steered from the dark of the lower decks, heavily influenced by trillions of alien microbes living in our digestive tract.
It's humbling, really.
Which leaves you with a final, slightly unnerving, but absolutely fascinating question to mull over long after this deep dive is finished.
Let's hear it.
If the trillions of bacteria residing in our gut are actively manufacturing the majority of our neurotransmitters, controlling our daily moods, dictating our food cravings, and literally unspooling our DNA, to what extent is our personality, our daily mood, or even our free will actually just the collective chemical voice of the bacteria living inside us?
It is a profound philosophical question grounded in hard biology. It completely blurs the line between the human host and the microbiome, and it is a frontier that science is only just beginning to truly explore.
It is definitely something to think about the next time someone tells you to just trust your gut. We will see you on the next deep dive into the source material.